Hey everyone, welcome back, or if this is your first time, welcome. I've been asked many times to create a PC build guide, and here it is. I put a lot of time into writing, recording, and editing this video to ensure even if you've never built a computer before, you can follow along and build your own system. Whether you're using the same parts as I am or not, this guide will give you a clear idea of what to expect and serve as a helpful resource when building your own PC. For this build, I recorded the entire process using 2 cameras to provide multiple angles so you won't miss a thing. The footage clearly shows how straightforward building a PC can be. It's really like assembling an advanced Lego set. I've included chapter controls in the video, so if you want to jump straight to the building process, you can. I've started with about 8 hours of raw footage, 4 hours from each camera, and edited it down significantly. Normally, building a PC would take me around 2 hours, but filming from 2 angles added extra time to the process. Why am I telling you this? To set expectations, of course. I've been building and repairing computers for nearly 30 years, so I know what I'm doing. If this is your first time building a PC, it could take anywhere from 4 to 12 hours, and that's completely normal. Take your time, follow along, and enjoy the process. Building your PC can stretch your budget much further. Ordering a system with the same specifications I selected from a custom PC company like Origin could cost $2,000 to $4,000 more. While that additional cost is often justified, they handle the labor, assembly, and include a business profit margin. You might also be paying premium for custom branding. The biggest advantage to a company-built custom rig, in my opinion, is the warranty. If you build your own PC and something breaks, you're on your own. But with a company-built system, you have support and someone to call for help if things go wrong. I've seen a lot of custom PC builds from companies like Origin, and one thing that stands out is the extra software they preload on your computer. While some of it might look cool, like animated backgrounds or making your recycling bin look like something out of the movie Hackers.
Okay, we need proof that we were here, and, yeah, garbage. Okay, give me garbage.
Those flashy UI enhancements might seem like fun at first, but they quickly become a headache. The problem is, all that visually pleasing stuff tends to break. It might stop working after a Windows or driver update, or sometimes it just decides to quit for no reason. How do I know this? Because my friends who buy these pre-built systems usually call me first when things go wrong. The company often asks them to ship the entire computer in for repairs, which could take weeks to get there, fixed, and returned. When you build your own PC, you avoid all that unnecessary software. And if it's not installed, it can't break. When you buy a high-end pre-built PC, you're often paying a huge premium for getting the latest and greatest hardware, but that doesn't always mean you're getting the newest versions of those parts. Here's why. There are massive markups for cutting-edge hardware from these companies. PC builders charge extra for the newest GPUs, CPUs, and memory kits, often way above MSRP, because they know early adopters are willing to pay. Let me give you an example. A company might charge $2,400 for an RTX 4090 when you can buy it yourself for about $1,800. Additionally, these companies buy parts in bulk in advance to get better deals from manufacturers. If NVIDIA releases a 4090 with updated memory chips, you might still get an older batch because they're working through their existing inventory. Finally, you have no control over specific components. You might think you're getting the latest Samsung M.2 SSD, but pre-built companies often swap in whatever bulk purchase drive they have, which might have slower speeds or a different NAND. Same goes for RAM, motherboards, and even GPUs. You don't always get the latest revision or best model. Bottom line, if you buy parts and put it together yourself, you can pick the absolute latest versions and avoid paying a huge premium just to get something that might already be outdated by the time it arrives. I thought it would be fun to compare the hardware I bought in 2004 to what I just purchased in 2024. 2 decades of technological progress have delivered incredible performance gains. I've always been a bit of a nerd before it was cool, and I love geeking out over this stuff. I've been building computers for a long time, ever since my friend Phoebus, hi Phoebus, showed me how to assemble my first PC back in 2004. I bought all the parts with a singular mission, to play World of Warcraft and Doom 3 on my new rig. If you're building your first PC, I highly recommend doing it with a friend. Ideally, someone with experience, but honestly, even if they don't have any, an extra set of hands and eyes is always a plus. Besides, let's face it, once your new monster PC is up and running, they probably won't see much of you anyway. The first build was a beast for its time. It ran World of Warcraft with all settings maxed out at a smooth 120 FPS, absolutely beautiful. The only games that really pushed it were Doom 3 on ultra settings and Dawn of War when things got chaotic. Man, we were spoiled for amazing games back then, weren't we? I did a little digging. Knights of the Old Republic launched on November 19th, 2003 for PC, and WoW dropped on November 23rd. What a time to be a gamer. That era also marked my first foray into video editing. I started with Windows Movie Maker and quickly upgraded to Vegas. Back then, rendering video was a painstaking process. When I was making WoW videos in 2005, it could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to render just 1 minute of video. The preview window was like a slideshow. If you add any post-processing effects, even a simple text overlay, it could grind all to a halt. To make sure everything looked right, I had to render small sections and watch them, adding even more time to the whole process. It wasn't until around 2011 that I finally built a machine capable of rendering 1080p video in real time at a 1:1 ratio. 1 minute of video in the timeline would take exactly 1 minute to render. It felt like a revolution compared to the old days, and it's wild to think about how far the technology has come since then. This PC build is absolute overkill for gaming. It's designed as a powerhouse workstation. I'll be using its performance for video rendering, digital asset creation, post-processing effects, and digital special effects. With this setup and Unreal Engine 5, I can even do motion capture, accelerate 3D printing applications for prop making, and so much more. I'm setting aside a personal challenge to make sure I truly harness the full power of the dark side. Yes, that's what I am going to name the computer. I just rendered a Nexius IRL update video using this new computer, and it renders 1080p video at an incredible 17:1 ratio. That means my system renders 17 times faster than the real-time playback of the video. The computer is so fast that I no longer need to pre-render anything. The preview is smooth, even with multiple layers, modifications, and effects. I can hit play in the video editor and watch it just like you are watching this video now. I believe a good video editor always rewatches the entire video from the viewer's perspective. In the past, I and many other editors might have skipped this step a few times to avoid waiting hours for yet another render, but with today's speeds and hardware, there's no excuse not to do it right. Instead of just listing all the parts needed to build a computer, I thought it would be more interesting to compare the components I used 2 decades ago to what I'm using today. Here are some of the major parts you need, along with the hardware I bought in 2004 versus what was purchased in 2024. I geek out over stuff like this. Honestly, I feel like we're living in the future. The fact that I have access to technology this powerful blows my mind. For a list of all the computer parts in this build, you can visit nexiusproductions.com/hardware. If you use the links from my website to make any purchases, you will be supporting this channel. If you want to build a PC without spending as much as I did, I'm putting together a few other builds that I consider best in class or best bang for your buck. I'll keep updating that webpage with new builds with different price ranges, so even if you're watching this video years from now, you'll find the latest recommendations. These days, my style is much more understated. I'm not in my 20s anymore, so I'm not looking for a light show every time I sit down at my computer. I prefer a clean, minimalist look, and practicality is key. I also have big hands, so working in small cases is a hassle. That's why I always go for a full ATX tower. This build uses the Define 7 XL by Fractal Design. Shout out to Phoebus again. I'm pretty sure he introduced me to this case manufacturer. The construction is rock solid, offering excellent cable and drive management. The side panels have sound dampening pads, keeping the case incredibly quiet. The top panel has all the ports and features you'd expect. I've had cases before that sounded like a wind tunnel, but this one is the complete opposite. It is a silent, black monolith of raw computing power. Here I am unboxing and prepping the case. I'm taking both panels off to facilitate cable management. Once we start plugging things in, you'll see how to use all those slots you see on the other side of the case. When building your computer, it is critical to read the user manual. Modern manuals are incredibly user-friendly, like putting together an advanced Lego set. Seriously, take the time to read the user and installation manuals that come with your components. Here's an example of why it's important. Most high-performance motherboards have 4 DIMM slots for RAM, dual inline memory module, often in 2 different colors, black, red, black, red. The motherboard manual will provide specific instructions for different scenarios. Like if you only have one RAM stick, it will tell you exactly which slot to use to ensure optimal performance. Skipping this step could mean missing out on the full potential of your hardware. The first step is to prep the case for mounting the motherboard. Do not remove the plastic square covering the CPU socket on the motherboard. Also, don't screw anything in yet. We are just getting things ready. Motherboards have specific mounting holes that align with standoffs in your case. First, identify where these holes are in your motherboard. Then, check the case to ensure that the mounting screws, also known as standoffs, are in the correct positions, allowing the motherboard to sit properly without forcing anything. At this stage, we're just making sure everything lines up. Before mounting the motherboard to the case, we'll connect some components directly to it. Since I have big hands, this gives me more room to maneuver and make connections without struggling in tight spaces. In the past, I would have mounted the motherboard first, but I've learned the hard way, especially when it comes to installing the heatsink, that it's much easier to connect everything beforehand. So don't mount the motherboard yet. Notice how I've set the motherboard on top of its anti-static bag. This is important to prevent any static discharge from damaging sensitive components. We're going to secure the CPU first. Now, listen carefully, do as I say, not as I do. Get a static wrist strap. Make sure you're working in a low static environment. I'm safe because I have 20 years of experience and I'm surrounded by concrete and tile. But if you're working on carpet, beware. A static discharge, like when you touch metal and you feel a little zap, can fry your CPU instantly if it happens while you are handling it. Did I scare you? Good. Get a static wrist strap. At the very least, make sure you discharge any static by touching metal before unboxing your CPU. First, open the CPU socket latch by pressing down and pulling the retention arm out from under the lip. Lift the latch and you'll see all those tiny, very fragile pins beneath the protective plastic. Do not touch them. I know they look shiny and intriguing, but resist the urge. You'll notice a small golden triangle in the corner of your CPU and a matching triangle on one of the corners of the motherboard socket. There are also small indentations on each side of the chip. These help ensure you align it correctly. Match the triangles and line up the indentations, then gently drop the CPU into place. To secure the chip, carefully close the latch. Notice how the plastic protector is still on there. As you secure the latch, you'll see the plastic cover pop off naturally, just like it should. This was my first time installing an M.2 drive, and it turned out to be pretty simple. The motherboard came with a small, clearly labeled package containing the special screw needed for installation. Since this screw is tiny, don't open the package until you're ready to install the drive. This will help you avoid losing it. The anchor screw consists of two parts: the base that screws into the motherboard and the locking screw that screws into the drive. I started by separating the two pieces and securing the base to the motherboard. I could mostly tighten it by hand, but I needed a bit more torque to get it snug. Fortunately, I had a tiny screwdriver from a glasses repair kit on my keyring. Using it, I tightened the top part of the anchor screw, adding just a little more force to ensure the base was firmly in place. Then I unscrewed the top part again to get ready to install the drive. Since the base was already snug, the top part came off easily. When unboxing the M.2 drive, you'll notice it installs at an angle. There's a small groove on the side of the edge connector, the gold fingers you see at one end, which lines up with the slot on the motherboard, similar to aligning the CPU earlier. You don't need to press hard, just gently insert it into the connector slot. Then hold the drive down gently and secure it with the top anchor screw. Of course, clumsy me with my big hands dropped the tiny anchor screw. I had to grab tweezers to pick it up. The next time, instead of using my fingers, I placed the screw on the end of the tiny screwdriver, which made securing everything much easier. Lesson learned. The RAM comes in that classic hard plastic packaging you practically have to destroy to open. Grab a sturdy pair of scissors and just cut your way in. Trying to pull it apart is a fool's errand. Most modern motherboards have 4 DIMM slots, or memory channels. If you're not filling all 4 slots, make sure to check the motherboard's manual for the correct placement of 1, 2, or 3 RAM sticks. Incorrect placement can lead to poor performance, or worse, the system might not boot at all until the RAM is properly installed. Installing the RAM is my favorite part. It's simple and sturdy. First, open the plastic latches at each end of the memory channels. Each RAM stick has a small groove, slightly off-center, on the edge connector. Line up this groove with the slot, just like you did with the M.2 drive. The RAM should sit evenly in the channel, and you gently press straight down on both corners. When done correctly, the latches will snap shut into the groove at the top of the RAM stick. Easy, right? Simple and efficient. You'll see here that I initially had the RAM stick turned the wrong way and had to flip it around. Older RAM types had the groove much further to one side, making alignment more obvious, but I don't think they make that kind of RAM anymore. This is the most RAM I've ever had in a computer, 192 gigabytes of DDR5. I need to make sure I put it to good use. And here's a nice close-up of the build so far. A securely installed 4TB M.2 drive, 192 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, a Ryzen 9 7950 X3D. We're well on our way to building an absolute beast of a machine. I decided to start with a traditional heatsink for this build. I do have a liquid cooling system that I'll install later when I overclock this beast, but since I'm not overclocking right now, the standard heatsink will do just fine. Traditional heatsinks are also more reliable. There is simply fewer mechanical components that can fail, and you never have to worry about leaks like with a liquid cooling system. This particular heatsink uses wire latches to secure the fans. Be careful when handling it by the fans, as they can pop off easily. I had to reattach mine after they came loose during shipping. I'm laying the heatsink on its side to remove the plastic protector from the bottom, ensuring nothing touches the plate that will connect to the CPU. You'll notice I'm reading the user manual. As you should too. The instructions and parts vary depending on your CPU's manufacturer. Since I'm using an AMD processor, I'm following the AMD specific steps. I've laid out all the necessary parts along with the thermal paste that came with the heatsink. My motherboard doesn't support this large heatsink out of the box, so I need to install the proper backplate. First, I remove the existing backplate and secure the anchor screws directly onto the motherboard. Then I install the crossbar supports onto these anchors. With the backplate configured, I'm ready to secure the radiator. When applying thermal paste, some people like to do one big glob in the center. Personally, I prefer a small dot in the middle and a bit in each corner. Think of a 5 on a 6-sided dice. The wire brackets that secure the fan to the radiator are a bit flimsy, so I took them off while mounting the radiator to the backplate. When reattaching the fans, I made sure the air would blow in the same direction out the back of the case. You want hot air to flow from one end of the radiator and through the rear fan out the back of the computer. If the fans are facing the wrong way, you'll just circulate hot air inside the case, which defeats the purpose. Finally, once the fans are secured, they need to be plugged into the motherboard. The motherboard's manual will provide a specific schematic showing exactly where to connect the CPU fans. Proper airflow and secure connections are key to keeping your system cool and running smoothly. Mounting the motherboard to the case should go quickly since we've already prepped everything. The back plate slides right into the slot, and if you followed along with this guide, you will already know that you have the anchor screws placed correctly. This part is really easy. Thanks to having a full ATX tower, we still have plenty of room to maneuver. However, we haven't installed the graphics card, nor have we started really connecting cables. By this time, you should be familiar enough with the case and the Mobo that this part should go quickly. It's easy to line up the holes on the anchor screws with the specific mounting holes on the motherboard. Of course, here you see Mr. Clumsy with his big hands repeatedly dropping screws. To make things easier, I use the trick of placing the screw on the tip of the screwdriver and guiding it into place. When tightening the screws, make sure they're snug but don't over tighten. You don't want to risk warping the motherboard, which I have seen happen. You just want it snug. Don't throw all the torque you can at it. So it turns out the cheap motherfuckers over at MSI can't do me the common damn courtesy of printing the user manual for their product. I guess it's time to join the 21st century and scan the QR code. The reason I need the user manual is because we're about to plug in a ton of cables and I want to make sure we do it correctly so as not to fry anything. The case comes with several pre-installed fans and a front panel that includes the power button, power light, USB ports, and audio jacks. We need to connect the case fans to the power supply and wire the front panel to the motherboard. That way, when you press the power button, the system actually turns on. Honestly, I don't know why everybody thinks PC building is so complicated. You have to connect the power button to the motherboard, so when you press the power button, it turns on. It's that simple. This is where removing the back panel pays off. The bundle of wires I'm untying here are all for the front panel. There is a cable for the power light, one for the power button, one for USB 2.0, one for USB 3.0, and a few others. I'm feeding all of these cables through the designated slots to keep everything neat and organized. Now that the cables are in the main compartment, it's time to connect them to the motherboard. You'll see the connections for the reset switch, power button, and power LED. Here's a close-up of the motherboard's connection points. If you look closely, most of them are clearly labeled, but I couldn't find where to plug the power button at first, so I had to consult the user manual again. Notice how often I mention the manual. It's because 99% of installation questions I've ever had were answered by simply reading the manual or the installation guide. Before plugging everything into the motherboard, I'm going to install the hard drive and run its cable through to the other side with the rest of the wires. That way I can connect everything in one go and keep the build as clean and organized as possible. I needed a reliable and cost-effective way to store raw video files without spending a fortune on cloud storage. So I picked up a 16 terabyte hard drive. If you're building your own PC, keep in mind that hard drive mounting methods vary between cases. So what you see me doing here might look different depending on your setup. One of the reasons I love this case is its hard drive mounting system. It uses a full-sized mounting plate with little black rubber cylinders that cushion the drive between the screws of the mount. In cheaper cases, you might find flimsy plastic rails that you screw onto the sides of the drive and then just slide it in a slot. Not nearly as sturdy. Once the drive is secured to the mounting plate, it simply slides in. I connect the SATA cable and run it through to the other side, ready to plug it into the motherboard. Now, pay attention to this part. I noticed that the SATA connections on the motherboard would be covered by the GPU once installed. So obviously, I connect the SATA cable before installing the GPU. Depending on your case, motherboard, and components, you might face a different challenge, but I'm highlighting this because it's a common pitfall. I can't tell you how many times I've installed a GPU, heatsink, or power supply, only to realize I just blocked access to a critical slot I need for another component. If this happens to you, don't worry, I've been there plenty of times. It's all part of the process. Now it's time to plug everything in. When building a new system, I am rarely able to do this without referencing the motherboard's user manual. The motherboard's user manual has pages on it dedicated to tell you which pins are for which components on the motherboard. Now, we already connected the CPU fans, but we still need to connect the SATA cable for the hard drive, the case front panel, the USB 2 and 3.0, the front panel headset jack, the front panel mic jack. If you have big hands like I do, good luck. Alright, now it's time to install a monster GPU. Modern graphics cards are enormous, practically computers in their own right. These beasts also weigh a lot, and it's funny to me that this card even comes with support brackets to prevent the weight from warping the motherboard or putting strain on the slot. First, I unscrew the top two screws along the back middle of the case and remove two of the expansion slot covers to make room for the GPU. This step preps the case for installation. With the case ready, you can remove the protective sticker covering the PCIe slot on the motherboard. Before you go any further, make sure you read the instructions for your specific GPU, as mounting methods can vary. This particular GPU uses a straightforward approach. You just need to screw a mounting bracket onto the card, then secure its corresponding standoff screw onto the case. It's just like we did when mounting the motherboard, but this time it will hold the back of the GPU in place. With everything set up, gently slide the GPU straight down into the PCIe slot. Use the screws that held the expansion slot covers to secure the card at one end. Then use the mounting bracket and its screw to secure to the other end. With the GPU firmly in place, you've just installed one of the most powerful components of your system. This beast will handle everything you throw at it, from high-end gaming to complex video rendering and 3D modeling. I like to save the power supply installation for last because it keeps the workspace clean and free of cables while working on other components. Most cases, including mine, use a similar mounting approach. You attach a mounting bracket to the power supply unit, also known as the PSU, and then you slide it into the back of the case, securing the bracket to the case. However, don't mount the PSU just yet, because we need to run all the necessary cables first. Check your motherboard's user manual. Most modern motherboards require 2 different power connections, typically a 4-pin and an 8-pin connector. Your GPU might need anywhere from 1 to 4 power connections, plus power is needed for the hard drive and the case fans. The great thing about modern power supplies is that they are modular. This means you only connect the cables you need, avoiding a mess of unused wires to manage. While the PSU is still outside of the case, I connect all the required cables to it. This gives me more room to maneuver. Then I run the cables through the back middle of the case, preparing them to run to the other side. Once all the cables are connected to the power supply unit and routed through the back middle of the case, I go ahead and install the power supply, securing it in place. You can really see the benefit of this installation order. Everything is tidy and accessible. Now it's just a matter of threading each cable through and connecting it to the correct channels on the motherboard, the GPU, storage drives, and fans. As I connect each component, I pull any excess cable slack through the back, keeping the build clean and avoiding unnecessary cable loops. This approach not only improves airflow, but also makes future upgrades or troubleshooting much easier. Here is what the finished build looks like. This is exactly what I mean by pulling all the slack through to the back. All the extra cable is neatly wrapped up and secured behind the side panel of the case. This particular case has built-in cable ties, which make it super easy to keep everything organized, and it gives a build that has a clean and professional look to it. You are going to need to make yourself a bootable drive to install Windows. There are hundreds of thousands of videos, tutorials, and articles explaining how to do that. I don't need to get into it here. If you want me to make a quick video for it, let me know in the comments. And if your comment and this video get more than 10 likes, I'll make a tutorial video for creating a boot drive to install the Windows operating system. Deal? Deal. The Omnissiah has blessed us. There is nothing quite like the feeling of turning on a new computer for the first time and seeing everything work perfectly. It's all that sweet reward after all the effort you put into a build. But if your build doesn't power up correctly, don't panic. A few things might happen. You might see a black screen. You could hear a beeping noise. If this happens, grab your motherboard's user manual. Most modern motherboards come with beep codes and/or error codes to help diagnose issues. You might find a small digital display showing a code like E9 or a cluster of lights that indicate a specific problem on the motherboard. When you look up E9 in the manual, you might see something that says E9 indicates a problem with the memory module. So with that knowledge, you can troubleshoot. For example, you could remove all but one RAM stick, test each individually, see if the error persists. You wouldn't know to do that without checking for the error code first. So yet another reason to always keep your manual handy. If it's your first build and it doesn't work perfectly on its first try, don't worry. Troubleshooting is part of the experience. Honestly, it would have been more helpful for you if something had gone wrong with my build, so I could show you how to troubleshoot in real time. But hey, I'll take the win. Here is a shot of my completed battle station. I went with 3 monitors. I work on 2 of them, and basically I'm always watching something in the background on the 3rd, unless I'm crazy multitasking some huge project, which I do from time to time. I actually like to only game on 1 monitor. It's easier for me to use my peripheral that way. Building your own PC, especially with premium parts, can save you anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 compared to ordering a similar build from a custom PC company. These companies charge hefty premiums for labor, assembly, and branding, costs you can avoid by doing it yourself. Not to mention, you gain a deeper understanding of your system and the satisfaction of knowing you built it with your own hands. Before you start building, get a static wrist strap. Don't be like me. They cost next to nothing and can save you from accidentally frying a critical component of your new computer. Trust me, it's worth it. If you've stuck around this long and you're not subscribed yet, please consider hitting that button. I built this absolute beast of a PC, the dark side, and I'll be posting videos showcasing all of the that this rig offers. From video rendering to 3D models and everything in between, I'll be pushing this hardware to its limits. Friendly reminder to check out nexiusproductions.com/hardware for a list of all the parts in this build. I will update that page as soon as I can with additional builds in different price ranges so you can get the best-in-class rig within your budget. Check out some of the other videos on this channel. There's a lot happening behind the scenes, and it'll all pay off soon. In past videos, I talked about building a badass computer and doing all this cool stuff that we've been planning, and here we are. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. A lot of money. And now it's time to create something amazing with all of this bleeding edge technology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.